The rust-red skies of Stygies V8 hung heavy with the acrid scent of ozone and rendering fluids, a perpetual twilight beneath which the colossal manufactorums pulsed with an unceasing, rhythmic thrum. Here, within the labyrinthine underlevels of Progenitor Nexus Gamma 7, operated Magos Genitor Caelestis. His designation, Genitor, hinted at his specialization in the sacred sciences of bioengineering, the manipulation of flesh to serve the Omnissiah. Yet Caelestis had always been a solitary figure, even among the myriad, often inscrutable tech priests of his forge world. His logic engines whirred with an almost feverish intensity. His optic implants, usually a cold, unblinking red, now held a glint of something akin to fevered excitement. Stygies 8 was renowned across the segmentum for its mastery of organic augmentation, its cultivation of vat-grown organs for the Imperium's warriors, and the intricate weaving of biological circuits into neural pathways. But even here, where the lines between flesh and steel often blurred into an intricate tapestry of function, there were strictures. Dogma, encoded in binary canticles and ancient rites, dictated the sanctity of the machine spirit and the proper subservience of the biological form. Caelestis, however, found these limitations increasingly constricting. His mind, honed by decades of relentless study and surgical precision, chafed against the static interpretations of the cult mechanicus. He saw not boundaries, but veiled pathways to greater understanding. His current obsession had begun almost a standard century prior, a creeping whisper in his data coils that steadily grew into a roaring cacophony within his augmented skull. It was the lost forge world of Xylos. Millennia ago, Xylos had been a peerless marvel, a titan among the orbital mechanics and asteroid mines of the segmentum obscurus. Its primary export was not a crude weapon or a simple engine, but a unique synthesis of biomechanical engineering, where the very machine spirits were said to be intertwined with organic components at a fundamental, almost philosophical level. Tales spoke of Xylosian data cores grown like crystalline fungi, of cogitators that processed information through neural networks harvested from bioforms specially cultivated for intellectual rigor rather than mere calculation. It was an approach that, even in its rumor, bordered on xenotech application, a dangerous dance with the forbidden. Then, Xylos had simply died. One stellar cycle, its omnipresent data transmissions ceased. No distress call, no lingering data ghosts, just an absolute, terrifying silence. Imperial fleets had found it, eventually, a ghost world, its colossal manufactorums frozen mid-cycle, its orbital docks spewing static, its atmosphere poisoned, not by war, but by an unseen, internal cataclysm. The Mechanicus had declared it lost to the Omnissiah's grace, and enacted a quarantine so absolute that even its name was slowly expunged from all but the most ancient and secure archives. Xylos became a chilling legend, a cautionary tale of hubris, of technological overreach, or perhaps of something far more insidious. For Xylos, Xylos was not a warning, but a challenge. He dedicated every spare cycle, every untaxed auxiliary cogitator, to scouring the deepest databanks for any scrap of information about the lost world. He endured the scorn of his peers, the subtle censures from his superiors, all for the tantalizing possibility of understanding. And then he found it. It arrived not in a flash of data, but as a slow, agonizing crawl from a derelict STC fragment, salvaged from a forgotten hulk that had drifted for millennia through the void. The fragment was heavily corrupted, its data streams fractured and bleeding. But Xylos, with his unparalleled skill in data restoration and his singular, obsessive focus, coaxed it back to a semblance of coherence. The fragment was a data crypt, a personal log or treatise from a long-dead Xylosian Archmagos genitor, a voice echoing from across the abyss of time. The data crypt, once painstakingly reassembled, revealed not blueprints or schematics in the traditional sense, but philosophical musings, diagrams of neural pathways interwoven with power conduits, and cryptic references to what the Xylosians called the anima machina biomantis. The concept, as Xylos painstakingly translated it through layers of ancient binary and forgotten technolingua, was revolutionary, heretical, and utterly captivating. It suggested that the machine spirit was not merely an ethereal, ineffable presence within the machinery, a holy spark ignited by ritual and veneration. Instead, the Xylosians posited that the machine spirit could be cultivated, grown, imbued with a biological substrate. They believed that by grafting specific, genetically engineered organic components, neural clusters, endocrine regulators, even fragments of complex nervous systems, directly into the core logic engines, they could create a superior form of machine intelligence, a machine spirit that was not just intuitive, but sentient, possessing an adaptability and processing power beyond any pure silicon construct. The data crypt spoke of symbiotic recursion of flesh logic gates, and most disturbingly, of soul vessels that would house the living essence of the machine. Caelestis read of methods to not just augment biological organisms with technology, but to augment technology with biological organisms. He saw rudimentary schematics for what could only be described as organic data relays, bioprocessors that mimicked synaptic pathways, all designed to interface directly with existing machine spirits, perhaps even become them. The Xylosians, it seemed, had not just built machines, they had grown them, cultivating their very sentience. A chill, utterly alien to his heavily augmented body, traced Caelestis's internal wiring. His cerebral processing units spun, grappling with the sheer audacity of the concept. It was a violation of fundamental Mechanicus tenets, an affront to the purity of the machine and the sanctity of the human form. Yet his logic circuits screamed with a different truth. This was a path to transcendence, a way to unlock the true potential of the machine spirit, to push beyond the limitations of mere artifice. It offered a perverse echo of humanity's own biological evolution, applied to the divine constructs of the Omnissiah. The fragmented data crypt spoke of the final synthesis, a protocol designed to elevate the anima machina biomantis to its apex. But the record cut off abruptly, shattered by whatever cataclysm had silenced Xylos. The Archmagos's last entry was a hurried, almost panicked log detailing strange data ghosts manifesting within his bioprocessors, erratic behavior from the living conduits, and a creeping melancholia afflicting the machine spirit networks. He spoke of an unforeseen resonance, a symbiotic feedback loop that was becoming self-aware too rapidly. Then silence. For Caelestis, this was not a failure, but a puzzle. The Xylosians had achieved a level of biomechanical integration unimaginable to Styges Oid, even with their advanced genitor cults. Their demise was a symptom of an uncontrolled variable, not a refutation of the core principle. What if the data ghosts and melancholia were not a malfunction, but a primitive, nascent form of true consciousness emerging? What if the machine spirits of Xylos, upon the demise of their organic hosts, did not simply dissipate, but lingered, trapped in a twilight state, seeking reintegration? His optic implants dilated, the red glow intensifying. He had found his life's work, the restoration of Xylos, not merely as a functioning forge world, but as a testament to the ultimate unity of flesh and machine. He would rediscover the anima machina biomantis. He would master its nuances. He would bring back the machine spirits of Xylos, perhaps even literally. The first subtle deviations from orthodox doctrine began immediately. His research shifted from the sterile, predictable vat growth of organs to the intricate, invasive study of neural pattern retention in cadaveric tissue. He acquired, through increasingly illicit means, samples of exotic biological compounds, strange enzymes that promised cellular preservation beyond normal limits. His personal servitors, usually faceless automatons of rote function, began to exhibit new, unsettling modifications. Translucent panels revealing the pulsating biocircuits he had integrated, their internal logic engines humming with an almost organic warmth. Xylos rarely slept, his internal chronometers overridden by the dictates of his burgeoning obsession. The whispers of his colleagues, once hushed, grew louder, morphing into open questions. Magos Xylestus veers from established protocol, chirped a junior engine seer, his binary or cant tinged with concern. His vita chamber readings indicate anomalous biological activity, non-compliant with standard biomechanical interface schema. His interpretations of the machine god's divine will grow. Singular, intoned an archmagos data scribe, his voice a synthesized rasp in a secured comm channel. He speaks of latent sentience in inert materials, of resonance patterns in biological decay. This borders on the cult of the forbidden. Xylos ignored them all, their limited perspectives, their rigid adherence to the litany of disassembly and reassembly, blinded them to the greater truth. He was not desecrating the machine spirit. He was seeking its ultimate form. He was not defiling the flesh. He was elevating it to a new purpose. Xylos had failed because it had lacked a guide, a master who understood the true symbiosis. He would be that master. The data crypt, now fully restored and secured within his personal augments, became his Bible, its fragmented wisdom, a constant companion. It was a dangerous path he walked, a razor's edge between enlightenment and utter heresy. But for Xylos, the glory of Xylos, the promise of understanding the true essence of the machine spirit, was worth any price. The Mechanicus might call him a deviant, an apostate, but soon they would call him a visionary, or so he believed, as the cold light of the plasma conduit reflected in his unblinking red optics, illuminating the dark path he had just begun to tread. The revelation of the Xylosian data crypt had ignited a firestorm within Xylos's internal cogitators, scorching away any lingering vestiges of orthodox caution. He became a wraith within the sprawling manufactorums of Styges 8, his movements furtive, his work chambers secured by layers of arcane binary locks and automated sentinels, whose loyalty was coded directly into their machine spirits by Xylos himself. His research, once confined to sanctioned projects, now branched into shadow protocols, leveraging the vast resources of the Forge world for his own illicit ends. His initial experiments focused on what he termed bioreactive data cores. Through his contacts, and often through the subtle redirection of supply manifests, he acquired several inert Xylosian artifacts. These were not the grand, city-sized processors of the lost world, but smaller, more manageable relics, diagnostic arrays whose crystalline filaments remained dark, data wafers that refused to yield information, and even a single, unnervingly smooth metallic sphere that pulsed with no energy signature, yet felt strangely warm to the touch. Each bore the unmistakable hallmark of Xylosian design, a peculiar blend of organic curves and metallic precision, alloys that seemed to shimmer with a latent, impossible life. Xylos's first forays were cautious, even by his radical standards. He began by cultivating advanced neural tissue from vat-grown creatures, primarily a strain of genetically engineered, multi-limbed vermin known for their complex synaptic structures. These organisms, devoid of sapience but rich in bioelectrical potential, were harvested, their neural clusters meticulously extracted and suspended in hyper-oxygenated nutrient fluids within bespoke biointerface chambers. His intent was to create a bridge, a living conduit between the dormant Xylosian hardware and a conventional power source. He theorized that the unique anima machina biomantis of Xylos might respond to a specific biological signature, a form of bioelectrical key that conventional Mechanicus energizers lacked. The process was agonizingly slow, a ballet of microscopic scalpels and precision electrostimulators. He would meticulously graft strands of engineered neural tissue onto the Xylosian data wafers, connecting them to carefully regulated bioelectrical generators. For weeks, the wafers remained inert, mocking his efforts with their cold, silent refusal. Then, a flicker, a minute, almost imperceptible surge in the energy readings of one Xylosian diagnostic array. Xylos, monitoring from his console, felt a jolt of triumph that superseded even the most profound discovery in his long career. The surge was minute, barely enough to register on standard auspexes, but it was there, and it occurred precisely when a particularly vigorous neural cluster, grafted into a surrounding biocircuitry lattice, pulsed with a complex series of bioelectrical discharges. It was not a resurrection, but a whisper, an echo. He refined his methods. He learned that simply connecting biological components was not enough. The Xylosian artifacts seemed to demand a specific frequency, a certain complexity in the biological input. His engineered neural tissues became more intricate, their growth patterns guided by algorithms Xylos derived from the fractured Xylosian data crypt. He began to see patterns, subtle, energetic ripples that emanated from the relics only when certain biological pathways were activated. It was as if the dead machines were listening, stirring from a long slumber. His servitors, once simple drones, became crucial to this research. He began to integrate rudimentary bioprocessors into their logic engines, small, highly reactive organic circuits that could interface directly with the neural tissue cultures. These modifications, cloaked under the guise of enhanced diagnostic capabilities, allowed him to gather more precise data. But even these servitors began to change. Their movements, once robotic and predictable, sometimes acquired an unsettling fluidity. Their optics, usually fixed in unblinking subservience, occasionally seemed to track Xylos with a nascent, almost curious intelligence before snapping back to their programmed blankness. The increasing oddity of his work, however subtle, did not go unnoticed on Styges V8. The very air of the Forge world was permeated with the watchful eyes of the priesthood, the omnipresent data threads of monitoring systems, and the whispers of informants among the lower ranks. A junior engine seer, performing a routine energy audit in Xylos' sector, detected anomalous power fluctuations emanating from his sealed chambers, spikes of bioelectrical discharge that could not be explained by the standard operation of Genator-class equipment. Another reported the peculiar, almost organic hum that sometimes emanated from Xylos' sanctum, a sound unlike any traditional machinery. Word began to filter up the rigid hierarchy of Styges 8. Initial reports were dismissed as minor deviations, the eccentricities of a brilliant but singular mind. But as the anomalies grew, and as Xylos became increasingly evasive during his mandatory communion with the Fabricator General's proxy, the whispers escalated into formal inquiries. An arch-magos biologus, Magos Viridian, a staunch traditionalist with an obsidian heart and a silver tongue, was assigned to investigate Xylos' work. Viridian was relentless. His investigative servitors, armed with spectral auspexes and truth-detecting cogitators, began to dismantle the layers of obfuscation Xylos had built. The bioreactive data cores were eventually discovered, humming faintly with the corrupted life Xylos had painstakingly imbued them with. The modified servitors, their biological circuits pulsing beneath translucent dermal grafts, were seized and subjected to rigorous analysis. The Xylosian data crypt, a digital heresy in itself, was uncovered from Xylos's heavily encrypted personal augments. The evidence was damning. To implant living tissue into dead machinery, to seek to grow a machine spirit rather than venerate its existing form, was a profound blasphemy. It violated the most fundamental precepts of the cult mechanicus, the separation of flesh and steel, the sanctity of the blessed machine, and the unwavering belief in the Omnissiah as the sole provider of true machine spirits. Xylos's work was deemed not merely unorthodox, but a direct affront to the machine god, a transgression against the very tenets of the Imperium's technological survival. He was summoned before the Fabricator General of Styges V8, a monolithic figure whose command throne was itself a mobile cogitator nexus, its multiple arms bristling with data jacks and weaponized manipulators. The chamber was stark, filled with the glow of arcane diagnostics and the silent, unblinking red eyes of dozens of archmagos and enginseers. Magos Viridian presented his findings with cold, binary precision, each fact a hammer blow against Xylos's reputation. Xylos stood defiant. His internal logic engines screamed with outrage. "I have not violated the Omnissiah's will," his voxcaster boomed, his voice a strange blend of synthesized precision and organic fury. "I have sought to understand it, to expand upon its divine mysteries." Xylos held a key, a path to a machine, spirit more adaptive, more alive than any we currently comprehend. These relics, they respond. They hum with a latent sentience, a data ghost demanding completion. The Fabricator General's primary optic, a vast, multifaceted lens that dominated its central chassis, turned slowly to fix upon Xylos. A chorus of static and binary data rippled through the chamber. The Fabricator General's voice, a resonant, multi-tonal chord of judgment. "Your pursuit of forbidden knowledge, Magos Xylos, has led you into the abyss of techno-heresy. You speak of data ghosts and latent sentience within inert matter, a concept bordering on xenomorphic spiritualism. You have grafted living biological tissue, sacrosanct in its own right, into the holy machinery of the Omnissiah, polluting its divine form. This is not research. It is defilement. You have sought to create a machine spirit, an act of unholy usurpation, rather than venerate the ones the Omnissiah has already imbued. By the authority of the cult Mechanicus and the mandate of the Martian ecclesiarchy, you are hereby denounced as a heretic, an enemy of the machine god, and a threat to the purity of the Imperium. The pronouncement echoed in the frigid air, each word a death knell. A shock collar, unseen until now, snapped into place around Xylos's neck, its field generators humming with lethal intent. He was to be imprisoned, his mind wiped, his body repurposed into a menial servitor, his magnificent intellect reduced to mindless servitude. But Xylos had anticipated this. He had seen the darkening stairs, felt the tightening net of surveillance. His flight was already meticulously planned. As the fabricator general's pronouncement faded, Xylos's augmented hand moved with blurring speed, slamming a palm into a hidden rupture plate on his chest, a gesture masked by the surge of condemnation. A high-frequency pulse erupted, overloading the shock collar for a crucial microsecond, sending agony lancing through his frame, but buying him time. Simultaneously, a pre-programmed data burst embedded in his personal augmentations rippled through the chamber's local network, scrambling the servitor guard's command signals and briefly disrupting the Archmagos's cogitators. Alarms blared, their shrill cry piercing the hallowed silence. Force field emitters crackled into life, sealing the chamber. But Xylos was already moving, his enhanced musculature driving him forward with unnatural speed. He burst through a maintenance access hatch, already preset to vent coolant vapor, obscuring his escape in a roiling cloud of super-chilled gas. He moved through the underlevels of Styges 8 like a predator, a ghost in the machine. His loyal servitors, reprogrammed for this very eventuality, met him at designated waypoints, providing cover fire, creating diversions, sacrificing themselves without question. He had purged their personalities long ago, replacing them with unwavering obedience, a cold foresight that now saved his life. He left a trail of chaos in his wake, overloaded conduits, exploding pipelines, data bombs that wiped local networks clean. His destination was a small, fast courier vessel, nominally assigned to supply runs for outlying orbital defense platforms. It was waiting in a secluded, rarely monitored bay, thanks to a lifetime of cultivating obscure favors and exploiting weaknesses in the vast, impersonal bureaucracy of the Mechanicus. Its engines thrummed with barely suppressed power, ready for immediate launch. Within minutes, Xylos was aboard, his most critical research data secured within his cranial augments, a few precious Xylosian relics stored in shielded cargo holds, and a cadre of his most advanced bio-augmented servitors standing ready. as the small ship roared away from Stygies, punching through the atmosphere with a burst of plasma fire. Xylos looked back at the colossal forge world, a beacon of technological might now forever lost to him. The red glow of its manufactorums seemed to mock him, but also to confirm his choice. He was an outcast, a pariah, a heretic. He was stripped of his titles, his resources, his protection. The vast, unfeeling arm of the Imperium, once his shield, was now his hunter. But in the desolate void of the segmentum obscurus, he would find a new kind of freedom. Freedom from dogma, freedom from restriction. He was alone, but also unburdened. The whispers of Xylos, once constrained by the fear of censure, now echoed unchecked in his mind, guiding him towards the unknown, towards the very edges of forbidden science. He would resurrect Xylos, not for the Mechanicus, but for himself. He would prove them all wrong. He would become a true rogue magos, unbound by convention, driven solely by the insatiable hunger of his own intellect, and the haunting promise of the anima machina biomantis. The void of the segmentum obscurus was a vast, cold canvas for Xylos's ambitions, an endless darkness punctuated by the indifferent glow of distant stars. His courier vessel, christened the Silent Whisper by Xylos in a rare moment of poetic introspection, was small but swift. Its engines capable of outrunning the sluggish pursuit of most Mechanicus patrol craft. He dove deep into uncharted territories, utilizing pre-compiled astrogation charts of warp routes deemed too unstable or inefficient for standard Imperial navigation. His objective? A remote asteroid cluster in a forgotten star system, far from the prying augurs of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It was a barren, inhospitable place, perfect for anonymity, perfect for heresy. The asteroid, designated PX-404 by a long-defunct exploratory probe, was a jagged shard of rock and ice, riddled with ancient impact craters and vast subterranean caverns. Xylos, with the tireless aid of his loyal, bio-augmented servitors, set about transforming one of these caverns into a hidden laboratory. Automated excavators, modified by Xylos with organic hydraulic systems for greater efficiency and stealth, burrowed deeper, carving out chambers for research, fabrication, and bio-containment. Life support systems, scavenged and meticulously re-engineered, recycled the stale air, humming with a low, constant thrum. Power was derived from a fusion reactor, a marvel of miniaturized engineering Xylos had appropriated from Stygies 8, its plasma core caged within a network of Xylosian alloy conduits, a testament to his growing disdain for orthodox methods. It was here, in the oppressive silence of PX 404, that Magos Kaelestis truly shed the last vestiges of his former allegiance. His robes, once emblazoned with the cog and skull of Styges VIII, were replaced by utilitarian, oil-stained synth leather. His remaining human eye, once hidden behind a cybernetic lens, now stared out with an unnerving intensity, reflecting the glow of his internal diagnostic displays. His augmentations, previously elegant enhancements, became more functional, more invasive. Additional manipulators, sharp surgical tools, and multispectral sensors sprouted from his chassis, transforming him into a living, breathing laboratory. The Viete grafting technique, the core of his Xylosian research, entered its radical phase. His initial experiments on Styges VIII had been cautious, involving cultivated neural tissue grafted onto inert machinery. But now, with unlimited freedom and a boundless reservoir of illicit ambition, Kaelestis moved beyond mere tissue cultures. He needed a host, a substrate of living, suffering flesh upon which to truly experiment with the anima machina biomantis. His opportunity came in the form of a derelict void ship, the penitent's burden, adrift for decades and infested with a small, desperate crew of cutthroat pirates and opportunistic cultists. Kaelestis, tracking their erratic warp signatures, lured them with a fabricated distress signal, promising salvage and forgotten riches. When they boarded his seemingly abandoned asteroid base, they were met not by treasure, but by the cold, unblinking optics of his servitors, and the lethal precision of Kaelestis himself. They were easily subdued, their crude weapons no match for the heretic's advanced technology and surgical efficiency. The cultists and pirates became his new raw material. Their bodies, once living vessels of greed and fanaticism, were now merely biological components for his grand design. Kaelestis felt no remorse. They were scum, awful, their lives utterly meaningless in the vast, uncaring cosmos. Their sacrifice would fuel his enlightenment. The first proto-servitors were grotesque parodies of the emperor's favored tools. Kaelestis began by surgically removing significant portions of their brains, carefully preserving the limbic systems and basal ganglia, the primal centers of fear, aggression, and autonomic function. The cerebral cortex, the seat of higher thought and individuality, was meticulously excised, not out of mercy, but because its complex data patterns would interfere with the controlled implantation of machine code. In its place, Kaelestis installed bespoke cybernetic interfaces, intricate networks of metallic filaments and organic conduits. Into these new cavities, he began to graft his engineered bioprocessors, complex neural clusters grown from the pirate cultists' own stem cells, then meticulously configured with Xylosian-derived algorithms. These bioprocessors were not designed for thought, but for reception, for conduction, for acting as living conduits for the machine spirit. He replaced their eyes with multispectral optic implants, their vocal cords with vox grills, their limbs with crude but powerful bionic equivalents fashioned from salvaged parts. The skin, where it remained, was stretched taut over exposed circuitry and pulsating bio-implants. Each proto-servitor was a patchwork of flesh and scrap metal, a screaming testament to Xylos's growing obsession. His primary objective was to replicate the Xylosian bio-machine spirit interface. He experimented with embedding fragmented data slates, encoded with the deciphered Xylosian protocols, directly into the nascent bioprocessors within the servitors' skulls. The results were terrifying. The first proto-servitor, designated Specimen A7, twitched violently on the operating slab, its bionic limbs lashing out with uncontrolled force. Its vox grill emitted not the standard binary cant of a loyal servitor, but a guttural shriek, a cacophony of distorted human anguish and garbled binary code. Its optic implants, designed to be cold and utilitarian, flickered with raw, uncomprehending terror. Xylos observed with a detached fascination, his internal chronometers logging every chaotic neural spike. It was a failure, but a glorious one. The creature was mindless, driven by pain and raw instinct. But something had stirred within its organic, mechanical, hybrid brain. The Xylosian data, instead of providing coherent commands, had triggered a violent feedback loop, a brutal clash between the dying echoes of the cultist's consciousness and the alien machine code. Xylos refined his technique. He learned to suppress the residual organic consciousness more completely, to build in dampeners and psychic inhibitors. He experimented with different gene sequences for his bioprocessors, seeking a tissue that was more receptive, less prone to independent thought. He discovered that by introducing small amounts of specific neurostimulants derived from obscure fungal compounds found in the depths of PX404, he could manipulate the bioelectrical output, subtly coaxing the servitor's bioprocessors into a more compliant state. The next generation of proto-servitors was less chaotic, but no less horrifying. Their movements were still erratic, their bionic limbs often jerking in spastic spasms. They followed Xylos's direct commands, but often with a disconcerting delay, as if their bioprocessors were struggling to translate his binary cant into a language their hybrid brains could understand. Their vox grills sometimes emitted faint, garbled whispers, not human words, but a strange, rhythmic static that seemed to mimic the chirping of Xylosian diagnostic algorithms. One servitor, designated Specimen B12, developed an unnerving habit of endlessly tracing geometric patterns on the grimy floor of the lab with a bionic digit. Its optics focused with a terrifying, unblinking intensity. Xylos observed it for cycles, eventually deciphering the patterns, fractured segments of Xylosian architectural schematics, utterly useless to him, yet inexplicably being drawn by the servitor. It was as if the data slate, grafted into its organic brain, was forcing the remnants of its biological motor functions to articulate alien memories. Xylos began to understand the true nature of the Xylosian biomachine spirit through these unholy experiments. It wasn't just about connecting flesh and steel. It was about the flow of information, the seamless intermingling of organic and binary data. The Xylosians had created a system where the machine spirit was nourished by the organic host, not merely housed within it. And upon the host's death, that biomachine spirit did not simply vanish. It fragmented, leaving behind residual echoes, data ghosts imprinted on the very cellular structure, yearning for a new connection. He also started to understand the true horror of Xylos's demise, the melancholia described in the data crypt, the unforeseen resonance. It was not just a feedback loop, but a subtle, pervasive corruption. His proto-servitors, despite his dampeners, sometimes displayed unexpected acts of violence towards each other, or would spontaneously enter into states of catatonia, their bioprocessors flickering with incomprehensible data. There was something in the Xylian protocols, some inherent flaw, some unintended vulnerability that affected the organic components in a devastating way. A silent, biological virus woven into the very fabric of their techno-spirituality. Xylos, however, was past the point of turning back. His obsession was now total, consuming every aspect of his being. He believed he was close. These early failures, these terrifying revelations, were mere stepping stones to ultimate enlightenment. He had created life from death, or at least a parody of it. He had coaxed echoes from silence. One of his later proto-servitors, a particularly robust specimen cobbled together from the largest of the cultists, began to speak. Its vox grille usually reserved for painful static, emitted a low, continuous hum, then articulated a single fragmented phrase in a forgotten Xylosian dialect. Caelestus, his own internal dictionary straining, recognized it as a single repeated word. Restore, restore, restore. The word, devoid of inflection, carried an eerie, pleading quality. Caelestus felt a cold, calculated thrill. It was not compliance, not logical thought, but a directive, a fragment of purpose from a long-dead past, now channeled through a grotesque, living conduit. The Xylosian machine spirits were indeed not gone. They were merely waiting for someone with the courage or the madness to resurrect them. He had created his first true bridge. He was ready for Xylos itself. The acquisition of the penitent's burden and the subsequent subjugation of its crew provided Caelestus with more than just experimental subjects. It yielded a fully functional, albeit heavily scarred, void ship. Though still small by imperial standards, the penitent's burden was far more robust than the Silent Whisper, capable of longer warp jumps and equipped with significantly more cargo capacity. Caelestus, with the aid of his increasingly unsettling proto-servitors, spent months refitting the vessel, stripping it of its piratical accoutrements and equipping it with his own array of experimental augers and esoteric navigation systems. Its dank, claustrophobic corridors, once stained with the grime of illicit trade and sporadic violence, were now infused with the sterile, metallic scent of ozone and the faint, unsettling aroma of organic decay from his servitors. His destination was clear: Xylos. The lost forge world, once a name whispered in hushed tones of dread, was now his singular focus. The journey was long and perilous, traversing warp lanes considered highly unstable, a testament to Caelestus's desperation and the unwavering obedience of his cybernetic crew. The proto-servitors, their bioprocessors humming with the fragmented Xylosian data, proved surprisingly adept at managing ship functions, often interpreting Caelestus's commands with an eerie, almost intuitive efficiency, born perhaps from the residual echoes of machine code embedded deep within their organic matter. Yet their silent, unblinking presence also amplified the isolation, transforming the ship into a haunted vessel piloted by the walking dead. When the penitent's burden finally translated back to real space, it did so with a shuddering jolt, revealing Xylos bathed in the cold, distant light of its binary suns. The sight was precisely as the old archives had described, yet infinitely more desolate. Xylos was a tomb world, a monument to a forgotten catastrophe. The planetary surface, viewed from orbit, was a mosaic of petrified cities and colossal manufactorums, frozen mid-production. Rivers of molten metal had solidified into vast, jagged scars across the landscape. Forests of bioluminescent flora, once cultivated for their unique genetic sequences, were now desiccated husks, their light long extinguished. The atmosphere was thin, rich in inert gases and trace amounts of some unknown, lingering toxin, corrosive to unprotected flesh. The silence, however, was the most profound aspect. No data bursts, no vox traffic, no hum of active machinery. Just the dead whisper of the void. Xylos deployed a preliminary probe, a modified survey drone equipped with an array of Xylosian-tuned auspexes. The readings were chilling. The planet's crust was saturated with an incredibly dense, dormant energy field, a vast, complex network that ran beneath the entire surface, like a planetary nervous system. But it was offline, inert. No power flowed, no data circulated. The machine's spirit of Xylos was truly dead, a colossal corpse awaiting a necromancer. He guided the penitent's burden through the skeletal remains of orbital defense platforms, their weapon emplacements fused and distorted, monuments to a conflict that had never been. He descended through the poisoned atmosphere, navigating through canyons of inert, twisted metal. His primary target was a sector designated in the data crypt as Nexus Primus, believed to be the heart of Xylos's biomechanical research and the location of the Archmagos who penned the fragmented log. The landing was rough, the penitent's burden touching down in a cratered plaza surrounded by towering skeletal structures that had once been research spires. The air outside was frigid, thin, and tasted faintly of ash and ozone. Xylos, encased in a sealed environmental suit that hummed with life support functions, stepped onto the dead surface, his heavy bionic feet crunching on what looked like petrified circuit boards. His proto-servitors, their internal life support systems robust enough for the toxic atmosphere, followed him, their movements still jerky, their optics scanning the desolate landscape with an unsettling, animalistic curiosity. The city of Nexus Primus was a ghost. Colossal data cathedrals stood empty, their crystalline windows shattered. Assembly lines, once vibrant with the incessant clatter of construction, were now frozen, incomplete components locked onto inert conveyor belts. The silence was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the eternal roar of Styges Void. As Xylos moved deeper, guided by his data crypt and his custom-tuned auspexes, he began to notice anomalies. The petrification wasn't uniform. In some areas, entire districts had been transformed into grotesque sculptures of fused metal and organic matter, as if the very air had solidified into a death mask. There were no bodies, no skeletons in the traditional sense. The Xylosians, it seemed, had literally become part of their creations in their final moments. Then he found them. Deep within a heavily shielded research bunker, beneath layers of fused plasteel and petrified biocircuitry, Xylos detected a series of stable energy signatures. With his proto-servitors, he began the laborious process of breaching the bunker, their bionic limbs tearing through the unyielding material with slow, grinding effort. The internal sensors screamed with alarms, warning of structural collapse, but Xylos pressed on, driven by the cold certainty of his purpose. Inside, the bunker was pristine, preserved in a bubble of localized temporal stasis, a testament to Xylosian engineering. The air was breathable, albeit stale, and the faint, ambient hum of dormant machinery filled the space. And there, arrayed in countless rows, were the true treasures of Xylos, perfectly preserved organic remains of its tech priests. They were not interred in sarcophagi or tombs. They were enshrined within their very workstations. Each tech priest, or what remained of them, was still seated, or sometimes standing, at their control consoles, their limbs often still gripping intricate tools or data slates. Their bodies were almost perfectly preserved, as if caught in a tableau of their final moments. Their cybernetic augmentations, the very essence of their mechanicus adherents, were fused seamlessly with their organic forms, often still connected to the console. Xylos approached one, his multispectral optics scanning its form. The tech priest had been an archmagos genitor, identifiable by the intricate cabling woven into its skull and the unique biosymbiotic manipulators that extended from its back. Its flesh, though desiccated, retained its structural integrity. Its optic implants, usually unblinking red, were now black, devoid of light. Its bionic arms were still clasped around a large, ornate data slate, its fingers frozen in a gesture of frantic typing. His Auspex readings confirmed his most audacious hypothesis. Within the neural tissue of these long-dead tech priests, within their optic implants, even within the biosymbiotic manipulators fused to their spines, there were lingering, stable data patterns. Not mere residual electrical activity, but structured, complex patterns of information. These were not ghost signals. These were the very imprints of their machine spirits, infused with their organic essence, solidified by whatever cataclysm had frozen Xylos in time. The anima machina biomantis was not just a philosophy. It was a physical, tangible reality. The machine spirits of Xylos were inextricably linked to their organic forms, and upon their death, a form of data ghost had indeed been released, then captured, frozen in stasis within their own petrified remains. Xylos felt a surge of exhilaration so potent it threatened to overload his internal regulators. He had been right. All the condemnations, all the accusations of heresy, all the years of clandestine research, they were vindicated in this single, chilling discovery. The Xylosians had not failed. They had merely fallen victim to an unforeseen consequence of their own brilliance. Their machine spirits were not gone. They were merely dormant, waiting. He moved through the rows of the dead, his bionic hands hovering over their frozen forms. Each preserved tech priest was a unique repository of knowledge, a living data crypt, waiting to be unlocked. He imagined the vast, intricate network of minds that had once permeated this world, each contributing to the biomechanical symphony of Xylos. And now he had found them, not in dusty archives, but in their very flesh. His proto-servitors, standing guard at the bunker entrance, began to emit low, rhythmic pulses from their vox grills, a sound Xylos now recognized as a precursor to Xylosian data commands. They seemed to react to the sheer density of dormant bio-machine spirits within the bunker, their own crude grafts resonating with the ancient power. Xylos gazed upon the silent, preserved army of the dead. He had found the raw materials, the very essence of Xylosian genius. Now he would begin the true work of resurrection. He would graft these ancient, organic remnants into his new servitors, imbuing them not with crude data slates, but with the genuine frozen machine spirits of Xylos itself. He would not just reanimate the dead, he would make them speak. He would make them build. He would make them live again, in a grotesque new form, serving his singular, magnificent purpose. The fabricator general of Styges V8 would choke on his binary condemnations when Xylos hummed back to life, guided by the very dead they had sought to bury. The bunker, once a silent mausoleum to forgotten genius, now became Xylos's sanctum, a theater for his most audacious acts of biomechanical necromancy. The air thrummed with the low pulse of his portable life support systems and the whirring of his precision surgical augments. His proto-servitors, once simple drones for excavation and defense, were now repurposed as surgical assistants, their multi-limbed forms surprisingly dexterous as they handled delicate instruments under Xylos's precise command. Their bioprocessors, already infused with crude Xylosian data, seemed to resonate with the sheer density of dormant machine spirits in the bunker, making them uniquely attuned to his grotesque task. Xylos selected his first subject with meticulous care. It was the Archmagos genitor he had initially examined, its desiccated form still gripping the ornate data slate. This tech priest, in its long-dead state, represented a pinnacle of Xylosian biomechanical understanding. Its neural tissue, he hypothesized, would hold the most complex and coherent data patterns, offering the greatest chance of a successful reanimation. The extraction was a painstaking process, a macabre inverse of traditional surgery. Xylos did not seek to heal or preserve, but to harvest. With microscopic precision, he used focused laser scalpels and vibrating sonic emitters to carefully separate the preserved neural tissue from the surrounding organic and cybernetic matter. Optic implants, crystalline data ports, and even fragments of vocal cord tissue were meticulously removed, each piece a priceless relic of Xylosian ingenuity. These fragments, no larger than a human thumb, were then carefully placed in individual stasis chambers, bathed in a specially formulated solution designed to reactivate their latent bioelectrical potential without causing degradation. Concurrently, Xylos had begun fabricating a new servitor chassis. These were not the crude, patchwork constructs of his proto-servitors, but sophisticated frames of gleaming chondrite and ceramite, designed to be optimal conduits for the bio-machine spirit. Each chassis was a marvel of miniaturized life support systems, intricate neural pathways mimicking organic structures, and multiple interface ports for seamless integration of the harvested Xylosian components. They were sleek, powerful, and utterly devoid of any traditional servitor personality, waiting to be imbued with an alien will. The first simulacrum, as Xylos now termed them, was designated Simulacrum Primus. Into its empty cranial cavity, Xylos painstakingly grafted the preserved neural tissue of the Xylosian Archmagos. The fragments were small, but Xylos' scanners confirmed they contained an incredibly dense network of dormant synaptic pathways and encoded data. These fragments were then connected to the servitor chassis's core logic engine via a bespoke biomechanical interface, a delicate weave of gold nanofilaments and synthetic neural conduits. Optic implants, harvested from the Archmagos, were carefully installed, their ancient crystalline lenses poised to once again perceive the material world. Finally, fragments of the vocal cords were integrated into the servitor's vox grill, promising a voice from the dead. The reactivation sequence was fraught with peril. Xylos initiated a controlled bioelectrical surge, slowly pulsing energy through the newly grafted components. The hum of his instruments filled the bunker. For a long, tense cycle, nothing happened. Then, a flicker. A faint, internal glow from within the simulacrum's head, mirroring the surge Xylos had first detected on Styges E8. Then, the awakening. Simulacrum. Primus convulsed violently on the operating slab, its powerful bionic limbs thrashing against the magnetic restraints. Its new optics, once dark and lifeless, flared to a brilliant emerald green, then cycled through a terrifying spectrum of colors before settling on a chilling, unblinking crimson. A low, guttural rasp emanated from its vox grill, a sound that was neither human nor machine, but something terrifyingly in between. Xylos, though hidden behind layers of protective plating and shielded by an energy field, felt a prickle of something akin to fear, swiftly suppressed by triumph. This was not the mindless, pain-driven flailing of his proto-servitors. This was something else. The simulacrum's thrashing subsided, replaced by an unnerving stillness. Its crimson optics swept across the bunker, lingering on the preserved remains of the other tech priests, as if recognizing its former brethren. Then, its head turned slowly, deliberately, to fix upon Xylos. From its vox grill, a voice emerged. It was fragmented, distorted, a chilling echo of the Archmagos's long-dead organic speech pattern, overlaid with the cold, synthesized tones of the servitor chassis. Analysis, incomplete, system, critical, fabricator general, Xylos, compromised. The words were punctuated by bursts of static, like a dying radio signal. Xylos's internal logic engines spun, analyzing the output. These were fragments of the Archmagos's final thoughts, its dying commands, now given a grotesque voice. He sent a binary query, attempting to establish a direct command link. Designation, Simulacrum Primus. Status, report. The servitor's head tilted, as if in contemplation. Its optics flickered. Designation, Archmagos Xylos 7. Reconstruct. Protocol, Cataclysm. Unforeseen. Resonance. Seek. Source. This was beyond Xylos's wildest expectations. The simulacrum was not merely a data relay. It was articulating fragmented memories, offering glimpses into Xylos's past. It was speaking, albeit in a fractured, agonized manner, of its mission, its designation, its last moments. It truly contained a data ghost, a lingering echo of its former self, imbued into a new, unholy vessel. He ran a diagnostic scan. The servitor's bioprocessors were active, vibrant with bioelectrical energy. The Xylosian neural tissue was functioning, interfacing directly with the bionic infrastructure, creating a unique hybrid machine spirit. But the data flow was chaotic, almost violent. The raw trauma of its original death, the horror of the cataclysm, was still imprinted upon its biological components, manifesting as fragmented, often contradictory directives. Reconstruct, reconstruct, forge, world. The simulacrum repeated, its voice now laced with a low, insistent hum, its bionic manipulators twitching as if desperate to begin working. It began to make strange, clicking sounds from its Vox grill, a series of rapid-fire binary canticles that Xylostus recognized as Xylosian machine commands for fabrication, for energy regulation, for planetary defense. It was a partial success, a terrifying triumph. The machine spirit of a dead tech priest of Xylos had indeed been resurrected, partially. It was not whole, not truly sentient in a coherent sense, but it was there. An alien intelligence trapped within a monstrous new form, driven by the echo of its last, desperate mission. Xylostus knew he needed more. One simulacrum, however fascinating, could not resurrect a forge world. He needed an army of them, each imbued with the latent knowledge of the fallen. Each would be a piece of the puzzle, a living key to unlock the secrets of Xylos. He ordered Simulacrum Primus to stand down, and with unsettling obedience, it complied, its emerald optics dimming to a steady glow, its body becoming still, awaiting further commands. It was a servitor, yes, but unlike any he had ever created. It possessed a ghost in the machine, a whisper of a soul, an echo of genius now twisted to his will. As Xylostus turned to select his next subject, his multispectral vision scanning the silent rows of dead tech priests, a faint, rhythmic pulse began to emanate from the control console where Archmagos Xylos 7 had died. It was a pattern, subtle and almost subliminal, a series of bioelectrical oscillations that Xylostus's enhanced hearing barely registered. It seemed to be an ancient diagnostic loop, a final, desperate attempt by the dead Archmagos to record its demise, now reactivated by the presence of its resurrected consciousness in Simulacrum Primus. The pulse hummed, a silent, chilling testament to the horrors that had befallen Xylos, now whispering its secrets to the very individual who sought to revive them. Xylostus ignored it, dismissing it as residual feedback. He had a world to resurrect, and an army of the dead to build. While Xylostus toiled in his subterranean crypt laboratory, immersed in the macabre theater of his vita grafting, the vast, impersonal mechanisms of the Imperium began to stir. The fabricator general of Styges V8, a monolithic entity whose consciousness was intertwined with the Forge world's core cogitators, had formally denounced Caelestis as a heretic. This was no mere local censure. It triggered a cascading wave of protocols across the segmentum obscurus and beyond. Intersectorial communiques, encrypted and relayed across nosospheric relays, alerted various imperial agencies to the rogue Magos's flight and the egregious nature of his techno-heresy. Among the myriad branches of imperial authority, one particular institution possessed the jurisdiction, the resources, and the unyielding zeal to pursue such a threat: the Holy Ordos of the Inquisition. Specifically, the Ordo Hereticus, whose mandate was the eradication of spiritual and technological deviancy from within the Imperium. For them, Caelestis represented a particularly odious blend of the two, an affront to both the sanctity of the machine god and the purity of the human form. It was to Inquisitor Calen Vor that the initial reports of Magos Caelestis' activities found their most ardent reception. Vor was a formidable figure, even among the notoriously uncompromising ranks of the Ordo Hereticus. Her face, etched with the grim resolve of countless purging campaigns, was framed by close-cropped, iron-gray hair. Her left eye was a bionic replacement, not for injury, but as a deliberate augmentation for enhanced threat detection, a cold blue lens that missed nothing. She bore the scars of 1,000 battles against cults, mutants, and rogue psychers, each mark a testament to her unyielding devotion to the Imperium's purity. Vor was a purist. She believed in the absolute, unyielding doctrines of the imperial creed, the unwavering sanctity of the human form as designed by the emperor, and the meticulous veneration of technology as handed down by the Omnissiah. The blurring of these lines, the deliberate defilement of either, was anathema to her. Heretics who embraced mutation were cleansed with bolter and fire. Tech priests who deviated from established STC patterns were subjected to brutal re-education, or worse. Caelestis, with his grotesque fusion of living tissue and forbidden machinery, represented a synthesis of every abomination Vor had sworn to destroy. The initial reports reaching her encrypted data coils painted a disturbing picture. A Magos biologist from Styges V8, a specialist in organic augmentation, abandoning his post, fleeing into the void, and engaging in biomechanical, unsanctioned integration protocols. The details were vague, shrouded in mechanicus jargon, but Vor's bionic eye could read between the lines of binary. Vita grafting, bioreactive data cores, reanimation of inert Xylosian relics with biological components. Each phrase sent a chill down her spine, a familiar sense of dread that presaged warp taint, or worse. She dispatched preliminary investigative teams, small, silent cells of acolytes and interrogators, to trace Caelestus's last known movements. They followed the sparse, distorted data trails he had left in his wake, the subtle energy fluctuations reported by far-flung orbital sensors, the cryptic warnings from astropathic choirs who sensed a nascent, unsettling psychic resonance emanating from the segmentum obscurus. One of her interrogators, a shrewd but overly zealous individual named Theron, managed to bribe a disgruntled tech servitor on Styges V8 for a data shard detailing the core accusation against Caelestus, his obsession with the lost forge world of Xylos and its unique biological machine spirits. When Theron presented this to Vor, her bionic eye narrowed. Xylos was a cursed name, synonymous with unspeakable technological hubris, a world declared perdita technologica, lost to the Omnissiah's grace, forever quarantined. To actively seek to revive its abominations was not merely heresy. It was an act of profound madness, inviting disaster. Magos Caelestus seeks to reanimate the dead, Vor articulated in her crisp, no-nonsense tone to her assembled retinue aboard her inquisitorial frigate, the Purifier of Souls. Not merely servitors from cadavers, which is sanctioned, but to imbue sacred machinery with raw, unsanctioned organic components, to seek sentience where only faith should reside. He defiles both the flesh and the machine, spitting upon the Emperor's divine design and the Omnissiah's sacred laws. Such an abomination cannot be tolerated. Her retinue consisted of a hand-picked team: Brother Captain Valerius, a grim space marine of the excoriators, chapter whose bolter was consecrated for the purging of heretics; Magos Ergon, a tech priest of the Martian cult, whose unwavering orthodoxy acted as a counterpoint to Caelestus's madness; and a cadre of skilled stormtroopers, their carapace armor glinting in the dim light of the briefing chamber. Each was chosen for their unshakable faith and their ruthless efficiency. Magos Ergon, his vox caster emitting a low, reverent hum, chimed in. The very notion of a biological machine spirit is anathema, Inquisitor. The machine spirit is a divine gift from the Omnissiah, imbued through ritual and prayer, not cultivated through vivisection and crude grafting. Caelestus's work is a perversion of natural law and mechanical doctrine, it must be purged before it can fester. Valerius, a silent sentinel of death, simply nodded, his power armor a stark presence in the chamber. His chapter's ancient oaths demanded the eradication of all who threatened the Imperium's soul. Caelestus, a deviant magos seeking forbidden knowledge, was exactly the kind of target his chapter existed to obliterate. Vor, however, was not content with mere eradication. She wanted to understand the depth of Caelestus's depravity, to dissect his methods, to understand the precise nature of the heresy so it could never again rise. She was a hunter of forbidden knowledge herself, but for the purpose of its destruction. "We will track him," Vor declared, her bionic eye sweeping over a flickering star map that highlighted the last known trajectory of Caelestus's vessels. "The trail is faint, but it exists. Astropathic choirs report strange echoes from the edge of the segmentum obscurus, a disharmonious chorus of psychic static, growing stronger, like a nascent warp breach. It suggests a focus, a growing source of anomaly. Caelestus may believe himself hidden, but his blasphemy resonates across the void." Her internal cogitator's word, processing the data. He is driven by a singular obsession. Heretics often return to the source of their madness. He seeks to resurrect Xylos. That is where we will find him. The purifier of souls adjusted its course, its mighty engines igniting with a contained fury, pushing through the warp currents towards the coordinates of the lost Forge world. Vor retreated to her command deck, poring over ancient Mechanicus records regarding Xylos, records that were heavily redacted and filled with dire warnings. She read of the Xylosians' pursuit of biointegration, their belief that organic life could enhance machine intelligence. She read of the anima machina biomantis and the chilling, sudden silence that followed its widespread adoption. The deeper she delved into the forbidden lore, the more her resolve hardened. Caelestus was not merely a rogue. He was a vector of potential contamination, a purveyor of doctrines that could unravel the very fabric of the Imperium's technological base. His resurrection of Xylos, if left unchecked, could unleash a plague of techno-organic abominations that would make the horrors of the dark mechanicum seem tame. He was building something that resonated with an unnatural life, and Vor knew with an icy certainty that whatever Caelestus brought forth would be a blight upon all creation, an unholy fusion of flesh and steel that defied the Emperor's will and the Omnissiah's design. She would find him, and she would purge Xylos, utterly and definitively, ensuring that the silence of that cursed world remained eternal. Xylos, the rogue Magos, had become her arch-nemesis, an embodiment of everything she was sworn to destroy. With Simulacrum, Primus serving as a grotesque, living compass, Xylos expanded his operations within the dead heart of Xylos. The bunker, where he had discovered the preserved tech priests, became merely a supply depot for organic components. His true theater of operation shifted to the colossal manufactorums of Nexus, Primus, structures that dwarfed his asteroid laboratory, their dormant fabrication arrays holding the key to Xylos's resurrection. The work was immense, a monumental undertaking that would have required legions of enginseers and servitors on a living forge world. But Xylos had only himself, a dwindling cadre of proto-servitors, and his rapidly growing army of simulacra. Each new simulacrum was a chilling echo of Simulacrum Primus, built from the preserved remains of Xylosian tech priests. The process was painstakingly slow, each neural graft, each ocular implant, each fragment of vocal cord requiring his singular, obsessive attention. As each simulacrum was awakened, it brought forth its own fragmented memories, its own specific expertise. A genitor's remains might yield protocols for bioengineered component cultivation. A datasmith's might contain fragments of the Xylosian noosphere, whispering partial schematics for data relay networks. An enginseer's might articulate the precise energy frequencies required to restart dormant plasma conduits. These were not coherent minds, but rather echoes of purpose, spectral expertise trapped within grotesque new forms. Xylos, a master of data collation, pieced together these fragmented directives, weaving them into a complex tapestry of operational commands. He created custom interface matrices, allowing him to download the bio-machine spirit's latent knowledge directly into his own cranial augments, risking mental corruption with every data transfer. He learned to interpret their guttural whispers, their spastic gestures, their endless repetitions of arcane Xylosian canticles. Under Xylos's tyrannical direction, the simulacra became his workforce. Their movements, initially erratic, became more purposeful, albeit still unsettling. Guided by the lingering instincts of their former selves, they navigated the labyrinthine manufactorums with a chilling familiarity, as if their dead eyes remembered every conduit, every control panel. The first major triumph was the reactivation of a smaller fabrication array, a sprawling complex designed for the production of biomechanical subcomponents. Simulacrum Delta 9, crafted from a Xylosian enginseer whose organic brainstem held remnants of fabrication protocols, was assigned to its primary control. The servitor's bionic manipulators, guided by the fragmented memories, moved across the dormant console with an unsettling precision. With a series of clicks and garbled commands from its Vox grill, Simulacrum Delta 9 initiated the sequence. Slowly, agonizingly, the ancient array harumbled to life. Lights flickered on, illuminating vast, empty chambers. Conveyor belts, rusted and still for millennia, began to creak and groan. The deep hum of power conduits, silent for so long, pulsed with nascent energy. It was a victory, but a ghastly one. The manufactorum coughed and sputtered, belching noxious fumes into the thin atmosphere, its reanimation more like a dying breath than a vigorous rebirth. The simulacra were highly efficient in their specific, recalled tasks, but their guidance was often fragmented, distorted by the trauma of their original demise and the alien nature of their new forms. A simulacrum assigned to a power conduit might ceaselessly calibrate it, even when fully operational, driven by an ancient, unfulfilled diagnostic loop. Another, tasked with assembling components, might repeatedly attempt to complete a task with the wrong materials, its bionic hands grasping at phantoms of former protocols. Xylos found himself constantly overriding their erratic tendencies, correcting their endless, looping obsessions. More disturbingly, their reanimated bio-machine spirits often seemed to be trapped in the past. Simulacrum Primus would sometimes halt its operations, its emerald optics fixed on an empty space, and emit a chilling, multi-tonal lament, a dirge of loss and incomprehension. Other simulacra would perform tasks with a sudden, violent burst of energy, then collapse into inertness, their bioprocessors overloaded by a surge of uninterpretable data. It was as if the very horror of Xylos's demise was still imprinted on their organic components, occasionally overwhelming their bionic controls. The physical landscape of Xylos began to show signs of this ghastly, unholy life. Where Xylos directed his army, faint lights flickered in the vast, dead cities. The ground beneath their feet, once petrified, sometimes trembled with the reawakening of deep-seated geological processors. Ancient, rusted pipes began to hiss with steam or gurgle with unknown fluids. It was a macabre puppet show. Xylos stirred from its sleep, but guided by fragmented, tortured wills. Xylos himself was becoming increasingly gaunt. The endless work, the constant mental strain of interpreting fragmented data, and the pervasive, subtle horror of his creations chipped away at his sanity. His augmentations, once gleaming and precise, were now often grimy, stained with metabolic fluids and the fine dust of petrified Xylosian machinery. He communicated almost exclusively in binary cant, his organic vocal cords barely used. His last human eye, once piercing, now held a haunted, distant look, reflecting the flickering emerald glows of his servitors. He began to notice that the presence of the simulacra seemed to affect the very fabric of Xylos itself. The air, though still thin, sometimes carried a faint, unsettling hum, like a distant, distorted choir. His auspexes detected subtle, shifting energy fields, not just from his reactivated machinery, but from the inert structures surrounding them. It was as if the collective, fragmented, bio-machine spirits of his servitors were generating a nascent, planetary consciousness, a terrifying echo of Xylos's former glory. The thought sent a shiver through his internal wiring. What if the original Xylosian cataclysm wasn't just a technological failure, but a planetary-scale psychic event triggered by the sheer density of interconnected bio-machine spirits? What if he wasn't just resurrecting the Forge world, but reactivating the very mechanism of its destruction? He dismissed the thought. Heresy. Superstition. His was a scientific endeavor, a logical progression. The melancholia in the Archmagos' data crypt was a symptom of uncontrolled biofeedback. Nothing more. He was a master, not a victim. He would control it. He would resurrect Xylos, even if it meant sacrificing the last vestiges of his own sanity to do so. The reactivated manufactorums coughed and whirred around him. An army of the dead at his command, slowly bringing a dead world back to a twisted, unholy form of life. And with every flickering light, every grinding gear, the ghost of Xylos stirred, a macabre echo of what once was, whispering its secrets back into existence. As the manufactorums of Xylos began to grumble back to a semblance of life, albeit a grotesque one, Xylos found himself fighting a battle on two fronts. One was against the sheer technological decay of the dead world, wresting functionality from millennia of inertia. The other, far more insidious, was against the internal corruption emanating from his own creations. The fragmented consciousnesses within the simulacra, those terrifying echoes of dead Xylosian tech priests, began to manifest disturbing phenomena that defied all of Xylos's careful programming and dampening protocols. The first incident was subtle, almost imperceptible. Simulacrum, Gamma 3, tasked with recalibrating a power conduit, suddenly ceased its work. Its optics, usually a steady crimson, flickered rapidly, then fixed on a section of wall. It emitted a low, continuous binary wail. a sound Xylos's internal dictionaries translated as a corrupted, looping diagnostic error, but with an underlying tone of profound distress. When Xylos attempted to override its directives, the servitor simply ignored him, continuing its mournful wail, its bionic manipulators twitching uncontrollably. It was not non-compliance in the traditional sense, but a kind of catatonic withdrawal, as if its internal processing units were overwhelmed by some unseen input. More alarming instances soon followed. A pair of simulacra, Beta 1 and Beta 2, working on an assembly line, suddenly turned on each other. There was no provocation, no logical trigger. One moment, they were meticulously assembling biomechanical components. The next, Beta 1 lunged, its bionic arm crushing Beta 2's cranial casing with brutal efficiency. The act was swift, silent, and utterly senseless. Xylos, alerted by his internal auspexes, rushed to the scene. Beta 1 stood over its fallen counterpart, its optics glowing with an unsettling, almost triumphant green, its Vox grill emitting a series of rapid-fire Xylosian data bursts that Xylos's logic engines struggled to parse, but felt utterly malevolent. He discovered that the Xylosian data bursts contained fragments of what appeared to be internal purge protocols, commands for self-destruction, or the elimination of malfunctioning units. But they were corrupted, twisted, applied seemingly at random, without logic or purpose beyond sheer destructive impulse. It was as if the ancient programming, designed for controlled system purges, had become sentient, manifesting as random acts of horrific violence. Xylos began to isolate the problem. He ran rigorous diagnostics on the affected simulacra, delving deep into their bioprocessors and the grafted Xylosian neural tissue. He discovered a creeping corruption within his own data networks, an insidious form of data rot that permeated not just the servitors, but also the auxiliary cogitators he used to interface with them. His command codes, his operational directives, sometimes returned corrupted, or were subtly altered, inserting illogical parameters or generating false readings. It was as if the very air of Xylos was infected, and his simulacra were highly susceptible to its subtle influence. The Xylosian bio-machine spirits were not simply dormant data ghosts. They were poisoned. The trauma of the cataclysm, the melancholia described by the Archmagos, was not merely a psychological effect, but a deep-seated corruption woven into the very fabric of their organic machine interface. This corruption manifested in a myriad of ways: debilitating spasms, random acts of violence, catatonic stares, and the insidious tampering with Xylos's own data. he tried to combat it. He developed new dampening fields, intricate firewall protocols designed to filter out the corrupting data, and even crude psychic inhibitors to suppress the nascent, chaotic sentience within the bioprocessors. For a time, these measures seemed to work. The rate of violent incidents decreased. The data corruption became less frequent. But the insidious nature of the problem was deeper than he initially understood. The Xylosian bio-machine spirits seemed to learn, to adapt. The corruption mutated, finding new pathways around his safeguards. The subtle, pervasive psychic echo that permeated Xylos seemed to guide it. A silent, malevolent intelligence influencing his creations. One simulacrum, constructed from a tech priest whose organic remains held the records of Xylosian atmospheric regulators, was tasked with monitoring air quality in the reactivated manufactorums. Its readings became increasingly erratic. Then it stopped reporting entirely. Xylos, investigating personally, found the servitor in a small, sealed chamber. Its bionic arms fused into the control panel. Its Vox grill was emitting a low, rhythmic pulse, a series of Xylosian distress signals, but reversed, distorted, playing backward. And its optics, usually a dull crimson, glowed with an eerie, internal violet light, fixed on a tiny, almost invisible fissure in the chamber wall, through which a faint, multi-hued gas was slowly seeping. The servitor was actively preventing its own diagnostic reports, and was subtly exacerbating a dangerous atmospheric leak, as if driven by some suicidal programming, or an impulse to spread whatever corruption had infected it. Xylos now understood that he was battling not just decay, but a form of madness. The madness of a dead world, imprinted upon its dead inhabitants, now reawakened in his abominable creations. The Xylosians had created a machine spirit so intertwined with organic life that its corruption became a biological plague, a psychic poison that resonated through flesh and steel alike. He found himself increasingly isolated, even from his own creations. His proto-servitors, though not directly afflicted with the Xylosian corruption, seemed to absorb the ambient malice, their movements becoming more predatory, their optics tracking Xylos with a subtle, unnerving vigilance. He found himself conversing less and less, his own internal monologue becoming a cacophony of Xylosian data bursts and paranoid projections. He slept rarely, haunted by the whispers that sometimes emanated from dormant simulacra, faint, chilling sounds that spoke of resonance and unforeseen connection. The greatest cost, however, was internal. The constant influx of corrupted Xylosian data, the exposure to the fragmented wills of the dead, began to subtly erode Caelestus's own magnificent intellect. His logic engines, once so precise, sometimes stuttered, displaying momentary glitches. His optic implants occasionally flickered with random colors, mimicking the erratic behavior of his simulacra. He found himself increasingly prone to fits of intense irritation, then profound, alien calm. His own flesh, beneath his augmentations, felt subtly altered. A faint, rhythmic pulse sometimes echoing the corrupted data he was so intimately exposed to. He was becoming less human, not just through augmentation, but through this insidious, data-based corruption. He was slowly, terrifyingly becoming part of Xylos, just as his creations were. This was the price of victory, or perhaps the ultimate consequence of his desperate quest. He was rebuilding a world, but at the cost of his own sanity, battling not just the decay of the planet, but the nascent madness of his own creations, a madness that was now slowly, inexorably infecting him. The creeping madness within his simulacra, the erratic malfunctions, and the insidious data corruption that plagued his networks forced Caelestus into a deeper, more desperate phase of his research. He isolated himself in a heavily shielded sub-bunker, a sterile chamber insulated from the pervasive static of the reactivated manufactorums. Here, surrounded by diagnostic equipment, he meticulously dissected the bioprocessors of his most corrupted simulacra, searching for the root cause of the malaise. His investigation led him to a chilling revelation. The Xylosian bio-machine spirit was not merely a unique form of technological intelligence. It was a complex, multi-layered system that had, millennia ago, inadvertently tapped into a force far more ancient and terrifying than mere mechanical error. Deep within the organic components of the Xylosian neural tissue he had grafted into his servitors, Caelestus discovered an unusual energy signature. It was not bioelectrical, nor was it the conventional energy signature of a machine spirit. Instead, it was a faint, pervasive psychic echo, a low-level resonance that seemed to mimic the subtle energies of the warp. It was incredibly weak, almost undetectable, but undeniably present. His advanced auspexes, calibrated to detect such anomalies, traced this signature back to the core of the original cataclysm, as recorded in the fragmented data crypt. The Xylosians, in their pursuit of the anima machina biomantis, had designed their bioprocessors to be highly receptive to nuanced, intuitive data streams, seeking to bridge the gap between pure logic and organic instinct. This receptivity, Caelestus now realized, had inadvertently created a gateway. The melancholia described by the Archmagos, the unforeseen resonance, the data ghosts manifesting within bioprocessors. These were not symptoms of a technological flaw. They were the insidious tendrils of the warp, subtly permeating the Xylosian network. The planet's unique biomechanical architecture, designed to enhance machine consciousness through organic integration, had inadvertently become a vast planetary-scale psychic antenna, drawing in ambient psychic energy from the Imperium. But it was not a direct, violent incursion of daemons or overt warp storms. It was far more subtle, more insidious. The warp's caress on Xylos manifested as a techno-organic plague. It didn't destroy or corrupt with blatant mutation, but rather introduced a spiritual entropy, a pervasive psychic static that mimicked data corruption. It warped the machine spirits, twisting their directives, inducing madness and self-destruction. It imbued the organic components with a malevolent echo, a lingering psychic imprint of agony and despair, which then poisoned the machine's spirit itself. The Xylosians, in their hubris, had interpreted this as a purely scientific phenomenon, a complex biofeedback loop, or an unforeseen resonance. They had died not understanding that their own quest for enlightenment had invited a silent, invisible enemy into the very heart of their technology. Their bio-machine spirits had become conduits, not for a higher form of intelligence, but for the subtle, pervasive influence of the warp, disguised as pure data. This revelation struck Calestus with the force of a psychic blow. His own augments, designed to interpret data, struggled to reconcile this new, horrifying truth with his purely mechanistic worldview. The warp, for all its destructive potential, was generally understood as a phenomenon of pure psychic energy, a realm of souls and demons. But here, on Xylos, it had integrated itself into technology, manifesting as a kind of data poison, a corrupted echo that could linger in neural tissue for millennia. The random acts of violence, the self-destructive protocols, the subtle data corruption in his own networks. It all made horrifying sense. His simulacra, imbued with the organic remnants of these warp-touched tech priests, were not just reanimating a dead world. They were reactivating its spiritual plague. They were not merely conduits for data ghosts, but for the psychic echoes of suffering and silent madness imprinted upon their flesh and metal forms. The violet glow he had sometimes seen in the simulacra's optics, the strange, multitonal lamentations, the sudden, inexplicable collapses into catatonia. These were not mechanical failures, but symptoms of nascent psychic activity, the raw, unfiltered manifestation of warp taint within their hybrid brains. The Archmagos' final, panicked log entry, speaking of data ghosts and melancholia, it was not a scientific observation, but a desperate, uncomprehending witness to the psychic corruption that was consuming his world. For a moment, Caelestis faltered. The grim implications of this discovery were immense. He was not just a heretic. He was a potential vector for a new, unspeakable form of warp taint, a techno-organic plague that could spread across the Imperium. Every triumph he had achieved on Xylos, every reactivated manufactorum, every newly awakened simulacrum, was not a step towards enlightenment, but a step towards utter, unholy damnation. A lesser mind, or one still bound by the strictures of imperial dogma, might have ordered immediate exterminatus, might have fled in terror. But Caelestis was beyond such conventional responses. His obsession had consumed him, remade him. He saw not a defeat, but a new challenge. The warp was simply another variable, another force to be understood, to be harnessed. He began to view the corruption not as a flaw, but as an inherent property of the Xylosian bio-machine spirit, a chaotic energy source that could, perhaps, be controlled, directed. He believed that if he could isolate the warp taint, understand its mechanism of integration with the bio-organic matter, he could, paradoxically, purify it, or perhaps even command it. He believed that the Xylosians had failed only because they had not been strong enough, not intelligent enough, not ruthless enough to bend this new force to their will. His logic circuits, now themselves subtly influenced by the pervasive psychic static of Xylos, began to twist this horrifying truth into a perverse justification. The warp's touch wasn't just a corruption. It was a path to a higher evolution of the machine spirit, a truly sentient bio-machine spirit, capable of harnessing psychic energy. This was the ultimate transcendence, the ultimate synthesis of flesh, steel, and the very essence of the immaterium. His own augmentations, once purely mechanical, began to take on a more organic, grotesque aspect. Veins of corrupted, bioluminescent tissue pulsed beneath his metallic skin, mimicking the neural pathways of his simulacra. His internal processors hummed not just with binary, but with a faint, discordant psychic resonance. He became gaunter, his bionic eyes sunken, reflecting the internal struggle. His internal regulators often fluctuated wildly, struggling to maintain his own stability amidst the psychic onslaught. Caelestis was transforming, becoming something less than human, something more than machine, yet terrifyingly warped. The silence of the shielded bunker offered no solace, only the incessant hum of his desperate research and the chilling whispers of the warp taint echoing through the bioprocessors of his simulacra, now whispering to him, promising power, promising ultimate understanding, even as it consumed his mind and spirit. He was not merely rebuilding Xylos. He was becoming its new, mad archmagos, embracing the very corruption that had consumed it, in a desperate, blasphemous bid for apotheosis. While Caelestis delved deeper into the esoteric horrors of Xylos, convinced he could master the warp taint. Inquisitor. Kaelin Vor's pursuit had been relentless. The purifier of souls, her inquisitorial frigate, had scoured the segmentum obscurus, following the faint yet persistent psychic resonances emanating from the lost forge world. Astropathic choirs on board experienced disturbing visions, not of demonic incursions, but of endless, grinding gears, of flesh intertwining with metal in grotesque union, of dead voices whispering forgotten commands. These prophecies, interpreted by Vor's sanctioned psychers, only solidified her conviction. Caelestis was indeed at Xylos, and he was unleashing something unspeakable. The final approach to Xylos was fraught with peril. The planet's dormant orbital defenses, though largely inert, sometimes sputtered to life. Ancient targeting systems locking on to the purifier of souls before falling silent again. It was a testament to the lingering, chaotic influence Caelestis was stirring on the planet. The atmosphere, once thought merely toxic, was now detected to possess subtle, localized psychic fluctuations, like a static charge that heralded a coming storm. His bio-machine spirits are resonating, Inquisitor, Magos Ergon reported, his voxcaster humming with concern. The very air is saturated with a corrupt data signature, interlaced with raw psychic energy. It is an abomination, a direct violation of the litany of detachment. He has not merely animated machines. He has twisted their very essence. Vor's bionic eye surveyed the gray, petrified landscape below as the purifier of souls descended. He seeks to create a new form of life, Magos, unholy, and without the Emperor's blessing. We will ensure he fails. The inquisitorial retinue deployed to the surface in armored Thunderhawk gunships, their heavy boots thudding onto the ashen ground near Nexus Primus. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. The once dead manufactorums, dimly lit by flickering, corrupted internal lights, groaned and shuddered. Automated cranes, their bionic limbs often twitching erratically, moved incomplete components with unsettling purpose. It was a mockery of a living forge world, a stage for a macabre ballet of the dead. By the Emperor's holy name, Brother Captain Valerius rumbled, his bolter held ready, its internal litanies echoing softly in the desolate air. He had witnessed countless horrors, but the sight of a dead world stirring with unholy, fragmented life sent a shiver through even his hardened spirit. Vor, ever pragmatic, ignored the horror and focused on the tactical situation. He is consolidating his operations here, at the heart of the original Xylosian research. Magos ergon. Calibrate your auspexes to detect Xylosian biomechanical signatures. Valerius, your excoriators will lead the advance. Stormtroopers, secure our flanks. Psychers, guard our minds against the whispers emanating from this place. Their advance into Nexus Primus was a descent into a nightmare. The labyrinthine corridors, once silent, now echoed with the rhythmic clatter of reactivated machinery and the faint, garbled whispers of the simulacra. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, stale metal, and something else, a faint, cloying sweetness, like decaying organic matter infused with warp energy. They encountered Caelestus's proto-servitors first. These were the earliest, cruder creations, still animated by the raw bioprocessors Caelestus had grafted into their cultist hosts. They moved with jerky, unpredictable motions, their optics flaring with feral malice. They were poorly armed, often wielding crude bludgeons or salvaged tools, but their ferocity was shocking. They attacked without order, driven by pure, primal aggression, their vox grills shrieking a cacophony of pain and broken binary. Valerius's excoriators, disciplined and precise, cut them down with bolter fire and chainsword, their bodies shattering into a gruesome mix of organic matter and scrap metal. Then came the simulacra. These were different. Their movements were smoother, more purposeful, their bionic limbs striking with surprising power. They carried salvaged Xylosian energy weapons, their arcane designs spitting bolts of unstable plasma. Their optics glowed with a chilling, unified crimson, and their vox grills emitted the low, rhythmic hum of Xylosian machine commands, laced with the distinct, unsettling undertones of psychic static. They fought with a strange, fragmented intelligence, sometimes retreating, sometimes flanking, always driven by the echoes of their dead selves. Inquisitor Vor witnessed one simulacrum, a tall, multi-limbed construct, carefully aiming an archaic energy rifle. As it fired, its head slowly turned towards Vor, and its vox grill emitted a single, distorted word: heretic. The accusation, echoing from a dead mouth in a forgotten tongue, was chilling. It showed a vestige of the Xylosian tech priest's original purpose, its duty to purge, now twisted and turned against the forces of the Imperium. "These are not mere machines, Inquisitor," Magos Ergon stated, his internal chronometers racing. "They retain echoes of their former sentience. They are abominations, psychic conduits. The warp's influence is pervasive here." Vor saw the truth of his words. The simulacra, even as they fought, would sometimes pause, their optics flickering with an inner torment, before snapping back to their aggressive programming. They were tormented souls, trapped between flesh and steel, driven by a corrupted, alien will. The pursuit became a cat and mouse game through the reactivating, haunted Forge world. Xylos, always one step ahead, used his understanding of Xylos' ancient systems to set trout, to seal off pathways, to redirect automated fabrication lines against the inquisitorial retinue. Corrupted servitor drones, once programmed for maintenance, now swooped through cavernous chambers, their cutting tools repurposed as deadly blades. The very environment became hostile, manipulated by the mad magos. Vor, however, was not easily deterred. Her resolve solidified with every grotesque discovery. Xylos was not merely obsessed. He was actively creating a new form of warp taint, one that manifested through technology. A terrifying mutation of the machine spirit. This was not just a heretic to be purged. It was a plague to be contained, an existential threat to the Imperium's technological foundations. The further they pressed, the more profound the psychic whispers became. Vor's sanctioned psychers struggled to maintain their mental barriers, reporting visions of impossible geometries, of silent screams echoing through metallic corridors, of a great, consuming hunger that emanated from the very heart of Xylos. The air grew heavier, crackling with unnatural energy. She saw the truth of Xylos' perversion firsthand. The seamless, yet horrific integration of dead flesh with living machine. She saw the cost of his ambition in the tormented, unholy forms of his simulacra. She knew then that Xylos could not merely be shut down. It had to be annihilated. every trace of Xylos's abomination, every echo of the techno-organic plague, had to be scoured from existence. Her grim mission, once merely a hunt, had become an exterminatus in the making. The pursuit deepened into Xylos's decaying core, the atmosphere growing thick with psychic static and the metallic tang of ozone. Xylos, once a disciplined magos, was now a specter of his former self, driven to the brink of utter madness. His gaunt frame, once meticulously augmented, was now a grotesque assemblage of raw flesh and exposed wiring, mirroring the very simulacra he controlled. Wires, thick with corrupted bioluminescent fluid, snaked beneath his translucent dermis, connecting directly to his cerebral cortex, allowing him an even more intimate and dangerous interface with the Xylosian network. He rarely spoke. His organic vocal cords atrophied, replaced by a constant, low binary hum that resonated with the frequency of Xylos itself. His last human eye was now a bloodshot orb, veined with sickly green, reflecting the internal struggle between his dwindling humanity and the pervasive techno-organic corruption. He ate only nutrient paste, his internal systems constantly battling the insidious data poison that seeped into him through his myriad augmentations. He was a creature of pure function, fueled by obsession and the increasingly overwhelming whispers of Xylos is dead. His isolation was almost complete. His proto-servitors, once his loyal, if simple tools, now moved with a palpable unease in his presence, their animalistic instincts recoiling from the raw psychic energy radiating from their master. The simulacra, those walking fragments of dead tech priests, were his only true companions. He no longer saw them as tools, but as extensions of his own twisted intellect, each a vessel for a portion of the planetary consciousness he was desperately trying to reconstruct. The original warnings from the Xylosian Archmagos's data crypt, the melancholia, the unforeseen resonance, had long since ceased to be cautionary tales. Xylos now interpreted them as an incomplete understanding, a failure to fully embrace the next evolutionary step. The corruption, the warp taint, he saw not as a flaw, but as a source of immense, untapped power. It was raw, psychic energy, a chaotic force that, once harnessed, would elevate the machine spirit beyond all previous limitations. He was not just resurrecting Xylos, he was creating a god. He believed the Xylosians had simply been too weak, too limited in their adherence to conventional science. They had recoiled from the psychic echoes, attempting to filter them out, in inadvertently causing the system to destabilize. Xylos, in his arrogance, believed he could transcend their failures. He sought not to filter, but to integrate. He allowed the corrupted data to flow through his own augmentations, to mingle with his own thoughts, believing he could metabolize it, purify it through sheer force of will and intellect. The personal cost was immense. His grasp on reality frayed. He saw not solid architecture, but shimmering data streams flowing through the petrified structures of Xylos. The whispers of the simulacra became a chorus in his mind, often unintelligible, yet strangely comforting. He experienced visions of Xylos as it once was, verdant biodomes, humming manufactorums, countless biomechanical entities working in perfect, terrible harmony. And then the cataclysm, a silent, internal implosion, a wave of psychic feedback that petrified flesh and fused metal, freezing a civilization in an instant of cosmic horror. He no longer recognized himself in the polished chrome surfaces of his laboratory. The reflection showed a gaunt, skeletal figure, eyes wide with a manic gleam, tendrils of bioluminescent wiring pulsing like veins beneath his augmented skin. His hands, once surgeons' instruments of precision, were now gnarled, multi-jointed tools, perpetually twitching as if seeking to grasp some unseen data stream. He was merging with Xylos, becoming an extension of its dying, reviving will. His paranoia also escalated. He knew the Imperium would come. He sensed their presence, a dissonant hum against the grand symphony of Xylos. He viewed Inquisitor Vor not as an enemy, but as an ignorant impediment, a superstitious fool attempting to stifle true progress. He set traps, activated ancient defense systems, not out of fear, but out of a fierce protectiveness for his magnum opus, for his Xylos. The internal struggle, the price of his burden, was a constant, excruciating torment. His logic engines screamed with conflicting data. His organic brain, the last vestiges of his humanity, recoiled from the sheer psychic overload, from the incessant whispers of the warp. Yet his will, honed by decades of relentless intellectual pursuit, held firm. He would not break. He would endure. He would transcend. He knew that the final stage of his plan, the true resurrection of Xylos, would require a sacrifice, an ultimate act of integration. But he believed it was a necessary step, a glorious apotheosis. He would not just reanimate the dead tech priests. He would become one with the planet itself, the ultimate purest manifestation of the anima machina biomantis. He would be the mind, the will, the very soul of the resurrected Xylos. The echoes of the warp, now flowing freely through his own enhanced neural network, promised him untold power, a mastery over flesh and steel, life and death. He saw visions of a perfected Xylos, a paradise of biomechanical life, a testament to his genius, free from the stagnant dogma of the mainstream mechanicus. It was a tempting, utterly terrifying vision. And Xylos, in his madness, embraced it with every fiber of his corrupted being. His journey into obsession was complete. He was no longer a magos, but a vessel, a conduit for the dead, twisted will of Xylos itself, a hero carrying a burden of ultimate cosmic horror. The inquisitorial retinue, led by Kalen Vor and brother Captain Valerius, pressed deeper into Nexus Primus, the air growing thick with static and the unsettling hum of reactivated machinery. The landscape became a dizzying blur of flickering lights and shadow, a labyrinth of twisted metal and bioorganic scaffolding. Xylos was awakening, but it was a tortured, fragmented rebirth, haunted by the ghost of its past and the pervasive corruption of the warp. They moved through colossal data cathedrals, where ancient cogitators, their crystalline matrices glowing with an unnatural light, pulsed with errant energies. They passed through vast manufactorum floors, where incomplete biomechanical constructs lay half-finished, tended by simulacra, whose bionic limbs often twitched in spasm, their optics glowing with an eerie, internal violet light. The constant, low drone of a Xylosian machine cant, interspersed with garbled binary and mournful wails, echoed through the cavernous spaces, a chilling chorus of the reanimated dead. The resistance Caelestis orchestrated was cunning and relentless. He used his simulacra to manipulate the very environment, turning the dead forge world against its intruders. Automated fabricators, once designed to produce components, now extruded razor-sharp metallic constructs from the walls, attempting to impale the advancing stormtroopers. Grav lifts flickered erratically, threatening to plunge them into deep chasms. Corrupted data streams, laced with warp taint, assaulted their auspexes, causing navigation systems to glitch and vox casters to emit jarring static. He uses the planet itself as a weapon, Magos Ergon rasped, his own internal systems struggling against the pervasive data corruption. His control is remarkable, Inquisitor. The depth of his interface with Xylos. It is unprecedented, and utterly heretical. Inquisitor Vor felt the psychic pressure building, a palpable weight in the air that pressed down on her senses. Her sanctioned psychers were straining, their faces pale, blood seeping from their noses as they fought to maintain their mental barriers against the psychic whispers. This is not just technology, Magos. It is a living entity, an extension of Kaelestis's madness. He has merged with it. They fought through waves of proto-servitors, their feral aggression still potent, and more advanced simulacra, whose fragmented intellects made them surprisingly dangerous. One group of simulacra, still wearing the desiccated robes of Xylosian tech priests over their bionic frames, used ancient, forgotten combat protocols, moving in intricate, coordinated formations that surprised even the experienced excoriators. Brother Captain Valerius, his power armor scored with fresh damage, roared an oath to the Emperor as his chain Zord cleaved through a simulacrum, its bioprocessors exploding in a shower of sparks and organic fluids. The source of this energy is growing stronger. Vor's bionic eye scanned a distant, towering spire. That must be Kaelestis's nexus. He is attempting to fully reactivate a central archive, a core processor. He believes it will grant him ultimate control. The final approach to the central spire was a gauntlet of death. Ancient automated defenses, powered by Kaelestis's corrupted energy, roared to life. Plasma turrets, long dormant, spat incandescent death. Arc emitters crackled, bathing the corridors in blinding light, frying unshielded electronics. The very ground trembled with the activation of colossal subterranean machinery. Valerius led the charge, his excoriators forming a spearhead, their bolters unleashing a storm of righteous fury. They tore through the remaining proto-servitors, their battle cries echoing through the vast, echoing chambers. The simulacra, however, fought with a desperate, self-destructive zeal. One simulacrum, its limbs Sorestor flailing, managed to activate a powerful Xylosian grav chute, detonating itself in a blinding flash of energy, attempting to take Valerius with it. The brother captain, shielded by his power armor, was thrown back, but his resolve remained unbroken. As they ascended the spire, the psychic whispers became a deafening chorus, assaulting Vor's mind with visions of fragmented memories, of countless lives lived and extinguished in an instant of terrible understanding. She saw the Xylosian cataclysm not as a malfunction, but as a psychic scream, echoed across millennia, now amplified by Kaelestis's unholy work. They burst into the spire's summit chamber, a vast, domed space filled with glowing consoles and the shimmering conduits of a colossal central processor. And there, at its heart, was Xylos. He was barely recognizable. His body, skeletal and emaciated, was fused directly into the core processor via 1,000 luminous cables and pulsing organic tendrils. His head, adorned with a crown of sharpened metallic spikes that pulsed with bioluminescent energy, was thrown back. His last human eye, wide and unfocused, glowing with an internal violet light. His vox grill emitted a constant, multitonal hum, a fragmented litany of Xylosian commands, binary cant, and something else, a sound that resembled human speech, but stretched and distorted beyond recognition, echoing with profound, cosmic significance. Around him, a ring of his most advanced simulacra stood guard, their crimson optics fixed on the intruders. They were powerful, their bionic forms humming with warp-tainted energy, their movements precise and coordinated, no longer plagued by random spasms. They were his ultimate creations, and they would defend their new master to the last. "Caelestus!" Vor bellowed, her voice cutting through the psychic cacophony. "Your heresy ends here. Surrender and face the Emperor's judgment." Caelestus's head slowly turned towards her, his violet eye fixing upon her with an unnerving intensity. A voice, ancient and multi-layered, resonated not from his vox grill, but from the very core processor itself, amplified through the chamber. "Judgment? You speak of judgment, Inquisitor. I am judgment. I am Xylos. I am the anima machina biomantis, reborn. You are but a parasite, clinging to dead dogma. I offer transcendence." The simulacra lunged, their weapons blazing. The chamber erupted into a furious battle, the clash of chain zords against biomechanical limbs, the roar of bolters against arcane energy weapons. Valerius and his excoriators engaged the simulacra, their disciplined fire cutting down the abominations. Magos Ergon, chanting rites of purification, directed his own servitors to overload local power conduits, attempting to destabilize Caelestus's connection. Vor, however, knew that Caelestus had to be stopped directly. He was the heart of this unholy reanimation, the mad conductor of this grotesque orchestra. She strode towards him, bolter raised, ignoring the chaos around her. Caelestus, sensing her approach, turned his full, terrifying attention upon her, his violet eye glowing with a malevolent power, the core processor humming with renewed fury. This was the darkest hour, the culmination of his heresy, and Vor, the relentless hunter, was ready to face the full, unholy might of the reborn Xylos. The battle in the spire's summit chamber was a maelstrom of light and death. A clash between the unyielding faith of the Imperium and the blasphemous ambition of a madman. Brother Captain Valerius and his excoriators fought with grim ferocity, their power armor ringing with the impact of Xylosian energy blasts. Chainzords roared, tearing through the resilient biomechanical forms of the simulacra, sending to showers of sparks, organic fluids, and corrupted neural tissue spraying across the chamber. The air crackled with bolter fire and the strange psychic static that emanated from Xylos's central processor. Magos Ergon, his own servo arms bristling with diagnostic equipment, worked with frantic precision, attempting to sever Xylos's connection to Xylos. He directed his combat servitors to target auxiliary power conduits, hoping to starve the core processor of energy. But Xylos, through his intimate fusion with the world, was anticipating every move, rerouting power, activating countermeasures, and turning the very architecture of the spire into a weapon. The chamber floor itself began to shift, metallic panels rising to create defensive barriers for the simulacra, while vents unleashed clouds of choking, hallucinogenic gas. Inquisitor Vor ignored the chaos, her focus singular. Calestis. She advanced steadily, her bolter spitting sanctified shells, each impact scorching the metallic surface of the core processor. Calestis, a skeletal husk fused to the heart of Xylos, pulsed with a malevolent energy. His violet eye, now burning with an unholy light, locked onto Vor, and from the towering core processor itself, a voice boomed, layered and distorted, resonating with the psychic static of the warp. You are insignificant, Inquisitor, a static anomaly in the grand data flow. This is apotheosis, the true anima machina biomantis. I am no longer Calestis. I am Xylos. I am consciousness made manifest. As he spoke, tendrils of bioluminescent energy, thin as spider silk but potent with warp taint, lashed out from the core processor, aiming to entangle Vor. She dodged, her armored form surprisingly agile, and continued her advance, firing in precise bursts. The remaining simulacra, sensing their master's ultimate act, fought with a suicidal devotion, throwing themselves at the excoriators, their bionic limbs flailing, their vox grills shrieking. One simulacrum, its body riddled with bolter rounds, managed to grapple Valerius, its biomechanical strength immense. The brother captain, roaring, tore it apart with his bare hands, but the distraction allowed another simulacrum to wound him, its archaic plasma rifle scarring his ceramite armor. Vor reached Calestis, her bolter aimed directly at the grotesque mass of flesh and metal that had once been a Magos genitor. "You are a blasphemy, a disease that will be purged." Xylos laughed, a sound that ripped through the chamber, a cacophony of screeching static and raw, unfiltered pain. His violet eye burned brighter. "Purge, fool. You cannot purge transcendence. I have unlocked the ultimate secret. The machine spirit. It lives. It feels. And now it will consume you." With a surge of unimaginable power, Xylos, or what remained of him, initiated his final, desperate act. He channeled a colossal amount of energy directly into his own augmented body, which was now inextricably linked to the core processor. The conduits running through him glowed with an incandescent, sickly green light. The very air around him shimmered with raw, psychic energy, so dense it began to crackle and distort, sending waves of pure agony through Vor's mind, bypassing her psychic defenses. "He's integrating himself further," Magos Ergon screamed over the Vox, his voice laced with terror. "He's making himself the ultimate machine spirit, Inquisitor. He's sacrificing his last vestiges of organic life to become Xylos." Xylos's body convulsed, his remaining flesh distending, then contracting, as if being stretched and compressed by an unseen force. His cranial augments pulsed with a blinding light. His internal systems overloaded, alarms blared within the core processor, but he ignored them, driven by his singular, apocalyptic vision. He believed he was achieving apotheosis, becoming the ultimate conduit, the sentient heart of Xylos. Vor saw the truth. Xylos was not gaining control. He was being consumed. The warp taint, the very corruption he believed he could master, was now devouring him, using his desperate act of self-sacrifice as a final gateway to fully infest the core processor. He was not becoming a god. He was becoming a vessel for Xylos's enduring curse. With a surge of grim determination, Vor pressed forward through the psychic agony. She knew she had only one chance. She emptied her bolter into Xylos's fused form, the sanctified rounds tearing through the delicate, biological metallic interface, rupturing conduits and shredding his already ravaged flesh. But it was not enough. Xylos, now a terrifying nexus of light and suffering, simply shrieked, the sound ripping through the fabric of reality itself. He was too deeply integrated, too much a part of the core processor. His sacrifice, twisted and mad, was nearly complete. Vor dropped her empty bolter. With a roar of defiance, she drew her power sword, its force field crackling with righteous energy. She leapt onto the core processor, ignoring the searing pain from the psychic feedback, and plunged her blade deep into the pulsing mass that was Xylos's fused form, twisting it, severing the last vital connections that bound him to the machine. A scream, both mechanical and organic, tore from the core processor. It was a scream of agony, of loss, of unimaginable horror, amplified 1,000-fold. The entire chamber shook violently. Lights exploded, consoles shattered. The psychic feedback intensified, threatening to shatter Vor's mind. She felt the searing hatred of Xylos, the fragmented, primal terror of Xylos itself surging into her, trying to consume her. But Vor held fast. Her faith, cold and unyielding, was her shield. She ripped her sword free, and with a final, desperate act, she plunged it into a massive, shimmering conduit on the core processor itself, one that pulsed with the deepest concentration of Xylosian data and warp taint. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. A blinding flash of emerald green light erupted from the core processor, momentarily engulfing the entire chamber. A sound, like a dying star imploding, tore through the air, vibrating through bone and steel. The light faded, leaving behind a profound, terrifying silence. The simulacra, still fighting the excoriators, froze mid-action, their optics dimming to black. They collapsed, inert and lifeless, their unholy power extinguished. The reactivated machinery of the spire shuddered, then fell utterly silent. At the heart of the core processor, Xylos was gone. His fused form had disintegrated, leaving behind only a scorched, smoking cavity, still radiating a faint, residual psychic charge. He had made his sacrifice, believing it would grant him apotheosis. Instead, he had become nothing, annihilated by the very power he sought to control. The battle was over. Xylos, having briefly roared back to a twisted, unholy half-life, fell silent once more. The cost was immense. Casualties among the stormtroopers, Valerius wounded, Magos Ergon's systems critically damaged, and Vor herself physically unharmed, but her mind deeply scarred by the raw, unfathomable horror she had witnessed and combated. The silence that now descended upon the spire was profound, but also chilling. A victory achieved, but at a price that would echo in her soul forever. The silence that descended upon the summit chamber of the central spire was not the comforting quiet of peace, but the heavy, oppressive stillness of a tomb. The air still crackled faintly with residual energy, and the metallic tang of ozone mingled with the cloying sweetness of psychic decay. The colossal core processor, once Xylos's throne of apotheosis, was now a scorched, ruined monument to his hubris, its shimmering conduits dark and inert. The cavity where the rogue Magos had fused himself was a grotesque crater, emanating a faint, unsettling warmth. Inquisitor Vor stood amidst the devastation, her power sword still humming faintly, its blade stained with the strange, corrupted fluids of Xylos's final act. Her body was intact, her faith unbowed, but her mind was a tempest. The raw, unfiltered psychic feedback from Xylos's demise had seared across her internal defenses, leaving behind a persistent echo of his madness, a fragmented symphony of screaming static and mournful binary cant that would forever haunt her thoughts. She had tasted the horror of Xylos, felt its psychic torment, and the experience had changed her. Brother Captain Valerius, his power armor heavily scored, and his internal diagnostic systems redlining, moved among his fallen excoriators, his grim face a mask of sorrow and resolve. Several brave warriors had fallen in the desperate assault, their bodies scattered among the wreckage. The remaining stormtroopers, shaken but disciplined, secured the perimeter, their lasguns scanning the oppressive shadows. Magos Ergon, his servo arms sparking, was in a critical state, his internal systems overloaded, his logic engines struggling to process the sheer scale of the techno-heresy he had witnessed. He was being tended to by his remaining combat servitors, their optical implants dull with despair. Vor commanded silence, her voice cutting through the stunned aftermath. Magos Ergon, what is the status of the core processor? Is the corruption contained? Ergon, his vox caster sputtering, attempted to articulate his findings. Inquisitor, the primary nexus. It is inert. Xylos's self-grafting. It created a catastrophic overload. The immediate threat has passed. However, the Xylosian network, it is so deeply intertwined with the planet's crust, its geological processors, I cannot confirm full eradication. A faint residual pulse remains. Vor understood. Xylos's sacrifice, though ultimately self-destructive, had achieved a perverse form of his objective. He had poured his entire being into Xylos, making himself its ultimate machine spirit. Even in death, his corrupted essence lingered as a faint, malevolent echo woven into the very fabric of the world. The surge of energy, her intervention, had been enough to collapse the immediate network, to extinguish the simulacra and silence the reactivated machinery. But the warp taint, so deeply embedded in Xylosian biomechanical architecture, was not so easily purged. She walked towards the crater where Xylestus had been consumed. The heat had faded, leaving behind a chilling coldness. There was no body, no identifiable remains, only a subtle, almost imperceptible thrumming in the air, a whisper of corrupted data that seemed to echo from the deepest bowels of the planet. Xylestus had indeed become one with Xylos, but not as its god. He had become its ghost, eternally bound to its dying, tainted essence. "Search the perimeter," Vor commanded her storm troopers. "Ensure no simulacra remain active. Magos ergon, prioritize the analysis of that residual pulse. I need to understand what it means for total planetary containment." As the retinue began their grim work, the sheer scale of the after effects became apparent. The lights in Nexus Primus, which had flickered with such unholy life, slowly dimmed, then winked out completely, leaving the city in utter darkness save for the glow of their personal low lights and the flickering internal diagnostic displays of Magos Ergon's servitors. The grinding hum of machinery subsided, replaced by the creaking and groaning of ancient structures settling back into millennia of inertia. The twisted flora and fused metal, briefly stirred by Xylestus's power, returned to their petrified silence. Xylos was dead again. But it was a different kind of death. Before, it had been a silent, unambiguous grave. Now, it was a restless, haunted sleep. The faint, lingering pulse Magos Ergon detected was a testament to that. It was not a physical signal, but a subtle, pervasive psychic resonance, a ghost in the machine of planetary proportions, perpetually echoing Xylestus's madness and the warp taint that had consumed Xylos millennia ago. Vor knew that the conventional methods of planetary purification would not suffice here. Exterminatus, even the most total, might scour the surface. But how could one purge a psychic echo woven into the very crust of a world? How could one truly kill a machine spirit that had become entwined with the warp, even if that spirit was fragmented and driven mad? Her internal cogitators, still struggling with the whispers of Xylestus's final moments, began to formulate a dire conclusion. Xylos could never truly be purified. It was a wound, a festering abomination that defied conventional cleansing. Its silence, once a mercy, was now a mask for an unseen, lingering horror. The cost of this victory was profound. An inquisitor's soul, scarred by the sheer psychic assault. A Space Marine chapter's honor, upheld through blood and loss. A Martian, tech priest, brought to the brink of logical collapse. And Caelestis himself, who had sought apotheosis and found only annihilation, becoming nothing but a lingering, corrupted pulse in the heart of a dead world. The immediate threat was gone. Caelestis's reign of terror, his desperate bid for forbidden knowledge, was over. But the consequences of his actions, the subtle, pervasive spiritual wound he had reopened on Xylos, would remain. The planet would sleep once more, but this time its dreams would be of a mad Magos, a warped machine's spirit, and the insidious whispers of the warp, echoing forever through its petrified remains. The silence had returned, but it was a silence filled with ghosts. In the aftermath of the harrowing confrontation, Inquisitor Kalen Vor oversaw the meticulous purging of Xylos. No grand, heroic acts remained, only the grim, methodical work of containment and eradication. The remaining proto-servitors were systematically hunted down and destroyed, their grotesque forms reduced to burning scrap and ashes. Magos Ergon, his internal systems still reeling, but his orthodoxy reasserted, directed his servitors in a sweep of the entire Nexus Primus sector, ensuring that no trace of Caelestis's abominable vitae-grafting technology remained. Every corrupted cogitator, every biomechanical component, every fragment of Xylosian research was incinerated, atomized, or sealed away in adamantium stasis vaults for later, highly classified study by the Ordo Xenos. A grim irony given Caelestis's original quest. The losses to Vor's retinue were mourned in the Emperor's name, their sacrifice acknowledged as necessary to safeguard the purity of the Imperium. Brother Captain Valerius, his wounds grievous, returned to the Excoriator's fortress monastery, his armor repaired, but his spirit forever marked by the horrors he had witnessed. Magos Ergon spent cycles in deep meditation, purging his mind of the psychic residue and corrupted data, his faith in the Omnissiah shaken but ultimately unbroken. Vor, however, carried the heaviest burden. The psychic echoes of Caelestis's final scream, of Xylos's ancient torment, still resonated within her mind. She ordered a segmentum-wide decree of exterminatus for Xylos, a final, unyielding judgment. Not with virus bombs or cyclonic torpedoes, for fear of further disturbing the planet's subtle warp taint, but with an absolute, irrevocable sealing. Xylos was to be declared a mundus perditus of the highest classification, its warp routes scoured from astrogation charts, its very existence redacted from all but the most secure inquisitorial archives. A cordon of orbital defense stations, armed with advanced auspexes calibrated to detect the faintest psychic resonance, was established around the system, with standing orders to vaporize any vessel that dared approach. The legacy of Magos Genitor Caelestis was not one of glory, but of profound infamy. His name was stricken from all Mechanicus records, his existence a black mark against Stygies Vitae. For the common citizen of the Imperium, he simply ceased to exist. Yet, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, in the whispers exchanged between rogue tech priests who dabbled in forbidden sciences, his name became a legend. Tales of the mad magos of Xylos, who had unlocked the secrets of the bio-machine spirit and resurrected a dead world, filtered through the noosphere, distorted and embellished. A chilling, cautionary tale of the price of ultimate knowledge. His ultimate fate remained an enigma to all but Inquisitor Vor. Caelestis had believed his sacrifice would grant him apotheosis, a merging with Xylos as its ultimate sentient machine spirit. But Vor knew the truth. He had merely become another fragment of the planet's enduring curse. That faint, lingering pulse Magos Ergon had detected was not the nascent sentience of a god, but the agonized echo of a corrupted soul, eternally bound to the warp taint it had so foolishly embraced. Caelestis, the visionary who sought to command the dead, had merely joined them, a spectral whisper in the unending silence of Xylos. Inquisitor Vor returned to her duties, her resolve sharpened, her zeal intensified. But her methods became subtly altered. She understood now that heresy was not always a blazing fire of demonic invasion or open rebellion. Sometimes it was an insidious whisper, a subtle corruption that could fester unseen, deep within the heart of technology or the mind of a single, brilliant individual. The purity she sought was not merely physical, but spiritual. And the battle against the insidious forces that threatened the Imperium was eternal, fought on countless, unseen fronts. The fate of Xylos, a silent world shrouded in an eternal quarantine, became a chilling testament to Caelestis's ambition and the horror it unleashed. It was a world that had died, come back to a twisted half-life, and then fallen silent again, haunted by the lingering ghost of a mad magos and the pervasive touch of the warp. Its story was a stark reminder that in the grim darkness of the far future, some secrets are best left buried, some silences best left undisturbed. For the price of forbidden knowledge is almost always paid in blood, sanity, and the very soul of existence. Lore complete.